Hello there, folks. DJ Burgstarre here, back with another tip of the day. So today I want to make just a short video on what you need to do if you're going to go ahead and send your project to a mastering house or somebody else that's going to master this track for you. And what I recommend is sending them stems of every single track rather than the final stereo mix. And in that way, they have the opportunity to change some levels of a certain track. Maybe you thought the vocals were the perfect volume, but they're going to say, hey, that doesn't work. It needs to be pulled back a bit or maybe a bit louder. And they can make some of those decisions at the master house. Might cost a little extra if you send stems rather than a stereo mix, but I think it gives them way more control over what you're gonna get back from them. So let me show you what we've got going on here. This is a track that, let me play a little bit of it, and let's look at my master chain because I've mastered it already, but you're not going to send them the master chain. You're going to turn all of your devices off in your master chain so they can make those decisions and put on their own compressors and their own multi-band compressors and their own utilities and their own limiter. And at a master house, they may not be using the same software you're using. I've got Ableton Live running. They may pull it into a different DAW completely, and they may be using external hardware for some of this. They may have a compressor they really want to use that's not software, that's actually going through some hardware. So let me show you what we have playing, and then we can talk about it a little bit. Basically, you want to make sure everything is labeled really nice. So as you can see here, I've got chords, reverse chords, strings, bass, my kick, my clap, female vocal, FX, male vocals, guitar, and my drum loop. And so they're not going to get confused on what's what, and it's nice and organized in the way of being labeled. I also want to label.
Life, it kept going wrong, kept going wrong.
Let's listen a bit.
Stuck inside this cage I made for way too long, for way too long. Now I'm staring at the starlight, waiting for directions, got in the way.
Alright, you get the idea there. So on my first track, what I like to do is put on the BPM. You want to have your beats per minute labeled on at least one, if not all your tracks, so they know exactly what the BPM is. Like I said, they may be using a different DAW or whatnot, and they definitely need to know what the BPM is that you recorded this in. And so what you want to do is when you turn off your master chain and then you look at your level on your master. Let's play this again from where it is. Let me forward that a little bit. You can see over here that I've got a lot of headroom, and that's what they want when they see your stems coming in. They want to have a lot of room. All of these tracks do not peak out. They don't get anywhere near the zero mark here. They've got a lot of headroom for them to work with because they would rather see it too low than too high, and they definitely do not want anything to peak out where you have your waveform where it's square at the top in any way. They want to see every little peak, and in that way they can make adjustments to volume and bring it up, bring it down without running into trouble, because if anything peaked out anywhere, they cannot fix that in the master. If you've got something that hit the top and it's now square up there, when you look at the waveform and you zoom in on it, it can't have any peaks anywhere. So let's also look at these tracks a little bit. So you have to make some decisions when you're, writing your music. And so I do have like some mid-side compression going on some of these because I wanted to widen the sound a little bit. And I do have, where I've cut out some of the low end and done some, EQ basically on some of these. Like look at this clap over here, this EQ. Look at that, because I've cut out all of this, so there's no, frequencies that do not need to be in this clap. So you can still make those kind of decisions before you send it to the master house, because they don't need to make every single decision for you. You've made these because you thought this is the way you wanted it to sound. And since you're sending them the stems of every single track, if they think that this needed a little bit more low end, they can add that later, or maybe remove some of the high end or whatnot, because you're sending them the stems. So you just want to make sure everything is labeled correctly, and the folder that you're going to send them to, what I like to use is, here's the folder, that it's got the name of the song and the beats per minute, basically. And in this folder will be all the stems that they're going to bring in that are all labeled, and it has the name of the song and the beats per minute. That's basically all you need to give them. So let's do this. What you do is you go to your master, and even though you like the way it sounds, I've grouped all these so I can just turn them all on and off with one button, which is nice. So here's what it sounds like with my master on it. And these are the decisions I made. But like I said, they're going to make their own decisions with this entire master chain. So what you want to do is turn all this off. Okay, and it's going to sound weak, and you're going to think, oh boy, this needs help. But that's why you're sending it to a master, to a pro. So here's what you're going to do. What I like to do is give them one measure of blank sound here, because I think it's nice that it doesn't just start off immediately with sound. So they have a little room to work with at the front and the back end. I like to make sure there's a little bit of trailing sound here in the back so they can fade this out correctly when they're making the master for you. There may be a little bit of reverb and some delays, and they can sort of decide, how to fade that out correctly at the end there for your master. So you want to make sure this is the right length. So let's go ahead and do this. So you just select export audio here. Once you've turned off, like I said, you go to your master here, right? You turn everything off in your master. And then you go to export. And up here, it wants to default to master, but you don't want that. You want to send them all individual tracks, and that will make stems, or basically individual audio files out of every single track. And it'll have the names that you've given them already, which is nice. Now, here's where you want to start this at the very beginning, so they have that extra blank one measure to work with. And at the end, I'm looking over here, and even though the song ends right here, I want to go ahead and give them, at least 2 or 3 measures of blank sound at the end. So if there's any trailing reverbs and that kind of thing, there's room there to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and do this at, let's say, 103, which would be a little long for the song itself, but it isn't mastered yet. So they're going to cut that off where they think necessary. Now, let's look at some of these other controls here. You don't want to render this include the master effects. You don't want it as a loop. You don't want to create it in mono, and you don't want to normalize it when you're giving them the master stems here. You can create analysis file on, that's okay. Now, the sample rate, you want to leave this at the same sample rate that you made this song in. You don't want to change this to something higher thinking, oh, if I send them 96, it'll be a better quality. That's not how it works. This song will sound best if you leave it the way you made it. The samples you pulled in and the way you wrote the song, keep it at that same sample rate, because you may have written it in 44.1, and if you did, leave it there. I did this at 48, and so Ableton converted all these samples I might have pulled in or whatnot to 48, and that's already been done. And so you don't want conversions going back and forth all the time. You want to leave it at whatever you created your song with. Okay, so coming further down here. So what you want to send them, definitely, I would recommend the WAV file. Some people work in AIFF and they send them that, but I think WAV is what most people want at 24-bit. Now, when they are done, they may send you this back as a 44.1 file at 16-bit because that's sort of, the industry standard sort of file format. But they still want it when they're making their master and working with it at a WAV file at 24-bit, and that's what I was hoping that this would sound best in, which it should. You definitely don't want to send them an MP3 out of these. You want it to be a WAV. And now I'm going to export this into that folder that I created, so we can find that on my desktop here. I made that, I called it, here we go. There it is. My Forage Alone is what the song is called, and it's at 106 BPM. And so that's where I want to save this. And I'm going to go ahead and say save. Now it's going to see it says rendering at 48, and that's going to do that for every stem on this song for each track. And they're all going to be labeled, whatever you labeled them over here. So you definitely want to label those correct so they know what they're working with. So it's a fairly simple process. Just make sure you have your master chain off and that everything is at a level they can work with. And, you'll watch some videos where they're saying, oh, the LFSU has to be at a certain exact volume and this and that. They don't really care about that. They really don't. They just want to make sure nothing peaks out. So you can give this to them at -12 is sort of a good level, and it might be a bit quiet for you when you're working with your song saying, boy, this song is not loud enough. But that's what the master house is going to do for you when you send them these files. They're going to put their own compressors, their own limiters, and they're going to, give you a good master, hopefully. And like I said, it might cost a little extra if you don't, if you do give them the stems of each track, because it makes a little more work for them rather than a stereo file. But if you're not sort of an expert at mixing, you want to give them the stems, because that gives them the opportunity to maybe do a little mix. They can fix it a bit if they think that the guitars are too low, or they can add a little more bass or treble to each instrument, or something like that. So now let's look at our folder that it made. Okay, so let's see here. Here is all of the files. So it's got the clap, it's got the drum loop, it's got the female vocal, the effects, the guitar, the kick. And so this is what you want to send them. So you just send them the whole folder with the BPM, and they should be able to bring it into whatever DAW they're working with, and hopefully they're using a really good DAW and know what they're doing, or they can send this through hardware, compressors and limiters and things like that, to really make this song sound pro, just like you want. But I've tried to put my own master on here, so when I get this back from a master house, I'll compare what they did to what I did, and we'll see which one's better. Hopefully they did a better job than I did, but sometimes not. Sometimes you really nailed it, but usually they're gonna know what they're doing and it's gonna sound great. So, but it's not gonna sound great if they're working with crap to begin with. So it's got to be a good song, you know, the writing's got to be well, and, you know, all these levels in here can't be peaking out, and you don't want to have too much reverb and delays that are going crazy everywhere, because they sort of can't fix that if it's in the audio stems. You know, you want to keep it minimum. Sometimes they may add some reverb to a track and make those kind of decisions if you give them the go ahead to just do whatever they want to it to make it sound as good as possible. So
Stuck inside this cage I made for way too long, for way too long. Now I'm staring at the starlight, waiting for directions, got in the way. And this life you keep on crying.
let me jump over to my guitar area here.
Too long, for way too long. Stuck inside this cage I made for way too long.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a good overview of how to send your stems to a master house where they're going to be able to work with it and hopefully send you back a song that's sort of radio ready. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Hope to see you guys on the next one. DJ Burgstarre out.